On February 8th, 2022, Shaka tweeted, "I'm probably non-binary, but I have a job, so I don't really care about that right now." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. This is a tweet I've wanted to do for a while, because it seems really important to the community it's about, but obviously, I can't really comment on it, because I'm not a non-binary person. But I put out a tweet joking about how there's some tweets, like this one, that I can't cover without an expert that's part of that community, but it would be weird for me just to DM someone being like, "Hey, you're non-binary, want to come on the show?" But thankfully, that actually prompted a longtime follower of mine, Nichol, to say, "Hey, if you want to talk about this tweet, I'll be your non-binary correspondent for it." So I spoke to Nichol about where they first found this tweet and how they relate to it. So Nichol, thank you for coming on. I do want to know though, where did you first encounter this tweet?
I mean, I'm pretty sure I first just saw it in the wild on Twitter. I'm someone who spends quite a bit of time on the app, for better or worse. And so I'm sure it was when it was first coming around and getting retweeted out. That's when it would have come across my timeline. And I mean, you find it pretty relatable pretty quick, at least for someone in my situation.
Yeah, so what is relatable about it?
So, like, I mean, the basic idea, or like for me, is like, when you say, like, okay, I might be non-binary, but I have a job, so I don't really care about that right now. There's, the jokey aspect of like, maybe I'm just kind of figuring it out. But then also like, all right, well, I'm working and I have this job. And okay, I think, trans people or non-binary people in general, the workplace can be a place of anxiety for starting to transition or starting to sort of experiment with a gender identity. And so it's like, well, I can't really care about that right now. I've got to work. I've got to put on this 9 to 5. I've got to go in, with my whatever my gender, my sex assigned at birth sort of workplace attire is. Depending on your job or where you are, you might not have the opportunity to really experiment or figure that out because you're working.
And is that a thing that, you said like it's universal. Is that a thing that you ever dealt with?
Like, definitely. I think when I was first figuring it out, I was working a retail job where I didn't really have too strict of a dress code. So there was a level of like, okay, I can kind of experiment with things, go with a little more like gender neutral presentation and like not be too held down by it. But then there's also the anxiety of like, all right, well, I'm in an uncontrollable environment. I'm dealing with customers who are going to be, who knows what their opinions are about this. And I was working in customer service at the time. So you're kind of, you're stuck where you're at if somebody will have something to say about it. My job now is, a little more formal dress, and I generally dress in a more male presenting way at work because that's just kind of easier. And there's just kind of less room like to experiment out with it. So there is definitely a level of like, all right, well, when I'm at work, I don't really, I can't really figure this out right now. I got to do this on my own time.
And is there an iteration of it? Because obviously it is about a serious thing, but I think it's generally used, at least what I found, among non-binary people in sort of a comedic sense. How have you seen it? Like, what's your take on how it's used in a comedic sense?
I mean, the comedic idea of like, it's something that is not always an option for a lot of people or not always presented. It's like, oh yeah, maybe. Well, all right. I'm going to kind of move on and maybe deal with that later.
It's funny because it's true, I think, which is like a trite thing to say.
Like, it is definitely funny. It's the kind of thing of like, you can laugh at it, but then as soon as you kind of think about it for a little bit too long, it then immediately sort of gets serious. But it is at the end of the day, like ultimately a funny tweet. It's something that like, okay, you can look at and you can relate. And that is very much the idea of like, oh geez, well, all right, got to deal with this, but I'm dealing with this other thing too. And it's kind of how it is for folks.
I want to thank Nichol again for coming on. Their insight was invaluable. So this sentiment, specifically this screenshot, has been shared by lots of non-binary people. Carrie called it one of the realest things ever posted to God's green internet. The Instagram account, Slightly Spiced Memes, posted it with the caption, "Going through an identity crisis on the clock." And people use it when they talk about themselves being non-binary. Like Zoe Rose Bryant said, "My third transversary is Friday, and I was thinking how far I've come and how much gayer I've gotten and how little I care about presenting conventionally feminine anymore. And I was like, I'm low-key she-they these days, but I'm too busy for all that." And then thought of this tweet. And there's a famous example where Obi-Wan Kenobi posted, "Coworker asked me my pronouns, and I said, they, them, but I'm at work right now, so it's whatever." Then she came back up to me later and said, "This is you," and showed me this meme. It really shows how much this post has crossed over, given that a not non-binary person showed it to a non-binary person and said, "Hey, this is you." And as always, this tweet is used as a reference to talk about characters from animated properties and comic books I'm not familiar with. Two examples are how Ro said about Silco from Arcane, he was low-key non-binary, but he had a revolution to plan, so he couldn't really care about that at that time, and Kazuo posted a screenshot of the tweet with, "I can't believe no one has said it yet, but this is 100% Nakahara Chuya." I believe this is a reference to a manga character with this name from a series called Bongo Stray Dogs, but there also is an early 20th century Japanese poet by that name. But based on the profile photo and the fact that it would be weird to say this about a early 20th century Japanese poet, I'm assuming they were saying it about this character. I can't comment about whether either of these takes are accurate because I was not familiar with either of these characters until 20 minutes ago. But I think to go back to the conversation with Nichol, what is so valuable about this tweet is that it sums up a feeling. It sums up a feeling that's really relatable to members of the community. And although there is a sadness to what the tweet is saying, that someone can't express their true gender identity because of life circumstances, the fact that it's relatable allows, I think, some release of like, yep, we've been there. I don't have a clever wrap-up except to say that I hope that we get to a place where this is not a relatable tweet anymore. There's almost nothing more core to one's being than how they express their gender, how they express that part of themselves. And I feel like until we live in a world where people can express that completely freely, we don't have freedom of expression at all. Follow me for a new tweet every day and consider subscribing at patreon.com/museum of Twitter, where you get the weekly Museum of Not Twitter, and you can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays.